I built $1 billion empire from nothing. I gave my wife everything: mansions, cars, a black card with no limit. But when I disguised myself as a janitor in my own company, I discovered she was spending my money on him. And him? He worked for me. The moment I saw them together in my private executive suite, laughing about how stupid I was, that's when I realized the woman I loved had been playing me for a fool. But they had no idea that Janitor, watching them, was about to burn their entire world down. Hey beautiful souls! Where are you watching from today? I hope you're doing amazing. Have you subscribed to my channel yet? If not, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you don't want to miss the emotional journeys we go on together here. Today's story is about Ethan Sterling, a man who thought he had everything, until he discovered the truth hiding in plain sight. Before we dive deeper, if you're new here, hi love. I'm glad you made it. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss stories that touch the heart. Ethan Sterling stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Manhattan penthouse, watching the city lights flicker like fallen stars 42 floors below. At 42, he was at the pinnacle of success, founder and CEO of Sterling Innovations, a tech empire valued at $4.2 billion. Tonight, however, the view brought no comfort. Behind him, Vanessa moved through their home like a beautiful ghost. Her designer heels clicked against Italian marble as she passed, not bothering to acknowledge him. The distance between them had grown into a chasm over the past few months. When had his wife become a stranger? Late meeting again, he asked, turning from the window. Vanessa paused, her silhouette framed in the hallway light. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, her red dress hugging every curve. Charity planning committee. You know how it is. He did know. Or thought he did. But the shopping bags from Chanel and Gucci sitting by the door told a different story. The committee meetings didn't typically include shopping sprees on Fifth Avenue. I thought we might have dinner together, Ethan said, hating the hint of pleading in his voice. It's been weeks since. I already ate, Vanessa interrupted, not meeting his eyes. Her phone chimed and she glanced down, a small smile touching her lips. It vanished when she looked up. I'm exhausted. Don't wait up. As she disappeared into their bedroom, Ethan noticed her perfume, different, stronger than usual. The door closed with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. 8 years of marriage, and he couldn't remember the last time she'd kissed him without it feeling like an obligation. He'd given her everything, the lifestyle, the credit cards, the freedom to pursue her passions. What had changed? His phone vibrated in his pocket. Probably another crisis at the office. As the CEO of a multinational corporation, his workday never truly ended. But when he pulled out his phone, it wasn't a text from his executive team. It was an email from an address he didn't recognize, truthseeker@protonmail.com. The subject line made his blood run cold: "Your wife is lying to you." Ethan's finger hovered over the delete button. Probably spam. Or a competitor trying to mess with his head before the big product launch next week. But something made him open it. The message was brief: "Your wife isn't who you think she is. Check your company's security footage from last Thursday night." Executive floor, 11:30 p.m. His throat tightened. Thursday night, Vanessa had said she was at a gallery opening in Chelsea. He'd been in Tokyo, closing their biggest acquisition to date. Ethan's hand trembled slightly as he set his phone down. He'd built an empire on calculated risks and trusting his instincts. Right now, every instinct screamed that his perfect life was about to shatter. Tomorrow, he'd find out why. Morning light streamed through the blinds as Ethan stood in his private bathroom, staring at his reflection. The face looking back at him belonged to a man who'd fought for everything he had. Growing up in a run-down apartment in Queens, Ethan had watched his mother work 3 jobs just to keep food on the table. His father had abandoned them when Ethan was 7, leaving nothing but debts and broken promises. The memory of his mother's exhausted eyes had fueled him through college scholarships, sleepless nights coding his first software, and the 100 investor rejections before his breakthrough. Sterling Innovations wasn't just a company, it was his redemption story. From a tiny office with second-hand furniture to the gleaming 50-story tower that now dominated the Manhattan skyline, Ethan had sacrificed everything for his vision. Relationships, health, normal working hours, all casualties on his road to success. Until Vanessa. 8 years ago, she'd walked into a charity auction where his company was sponsoring a table. He'd been newly wealthy then, uncomfortable in his tailored suit, trying not to look like an imposter among Manhattan's elite. Vanessa Pierce had been the curator for the gallery hosting the event, a struggling artist with dreams bigger than her bank account but with connections to New York's old money families. "That painting you're staring at," she'd said, appearing at his side. "It's speaking to you, isn't it?" The canvas had been a riot of colors that somehow conveyed more emotion than any photograph could. "It feels like looking at the future," he'd admitted. "Chaotic but full of possibility." Her smile had changed something in him. Most people just see the chaos. They'd been married 6 months later. In those early days, she'd been his anchor, his translator to the world of old money and social connections that had always been foreign to him. She'd decorated their first penthouse, taught him which wines to order, which charities mattered. When investors or clients came for dinner, she charmed them effortlessly. For the first time since his childhood, Ethan had felt like he belonged somewhere, with her. And hey, while you're here, if you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you as part of the family. Go on, I'll wait. Ethan's phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The screen displayed James Chen, his CFO. His best friend for the past 6 years. "Morning, boss," James's voice was cheerful as always. At 39, James had the easy confidence of someone born into privilege but the work ethic of someone with something to prove. Harvard Business School, McKinsey Consulting, then Ethan had poached him from Goldman Sachs. With his impeccable suits, salt and pepper temples, and ability to charm any room, James was everything Ethan wasn't: polished, connected, and socially graceful. The Jensen acquisition numbers look solid. "We should celebrate tonight. Dinner at Passe? I can have my assistant make reservations." "Not tonight," Ethan said, the anonymous email weighing on his mind. "I need to check something at the office." "Rain check. Everything okay?" James sounded concerned. "You've been working too hard, man. Even billionaires need downtime. Vanessa called me yesterday, worried about you." Ethan's grip tightened on the phone. "Vanessa called you?" "Just checking on that donation to the Metropolitan Museum gala." "Hey, we still on for racquetball Saturday? I need to redeem myself after last week's humiliation." After hanging up, Ethan sat heavily on the edge of his bed. James and Vanessa had always gotten along well, too well, sometimes. But they were the two people he trusted most. The thought forming in the back of his mind felt like betrayal. By noon, Ethan was at Sterling Innovations headquarters, sequestered in his office. He'd cancelled his meetings, telling his assistant he needed to prepare for next week's board presentation. Instead, he was accessing the building's security system, something he hadn't personally done in years. "Mr. Sterling." A knock at his door made him quickly minimize the window. "Human Resources sent up the files you requested." "Thank you, Emma." The personnel file for Rita Morales was thin. 62 years old. Night shift cleaning supervisor for 20 years, longer than Sterling Innovations had owned the building. Employee of the month 7 times. Perfect attendance record. A widow with 3 grown children and 5 grandchildren. What the file didn't say was what Ethan knew from his early days, when he'd sometimes work until 2 a.m. and Rita would bring him coffee without being asked. Rita knew every employee's habits, remembered their birthdays, noticed when someone was having a bad day. And most importantly, Rita saw everything. Instagram notifications popped up on Ethan's phone. Vanessa's latest post showed her at a charity luncheon, radiantly beautiful in a Dior dress he'd bought her for their anniversary. The caption read, "So blessed to help raise $2 million for children's cancer research today." Giving back blessed. 3,000 likes in 20 minutes. The comments gushed about her generosity, her style, her perfect life. The woman in those carefully filtered photos was Vanessa Sterling, social media influencer, charity gala chair, perfect corporate wife. The woman who had left their apartment last night with a different perfume and a secret smile was someone he didn't recognize. Ethan closed the browser and stared out at the empire he'd built. 50 stories of glass and steel. 6,000 employees worldwide. Quarterly profits that exceeded the GDP of small nations. And still, in his darkest moments, he wondered if he'd ever be good enough. Vanessa came from a world where achievements were inherited, not earned. Old money. Prep schools. Summer homes passed down through generations. Despite her family's financial setbacks that had forced her to work, she'd been raised to move effortlessly through society's upper echelons. How many times had he caught that flicker of disappointment in her eyes when he missed some unwritten social rule? How often had she smoothly intervened when he used the wrong fork or mentioned business at a dinner party where such talk was considered gauche? Tomorrow night, the building's night shift would gain a new janitor. And Ethan Sterling would discover exactly what happened when he wasn't watching. The service entrance of Sterling Innovations looked nothing like the gleaming main lobby Ethan passed through each morning. Bare concrete, flickering fluorescent lights, and the smell of industrial cleaners welcomed him as he clutched a battered lunch pail. The security guard barely glanced at his ID badge. Michael Rodriguez, janitorial staff, hired Tuesday. The scratchy polyester uniform felt alien against Ethan's skin, accustomed to custom tailoring. 3 days of carefully cultivated stubble covered his normally clean-shaven face. Glasses he didn't need, hair dyed slightly darker and cut cheaply, shoulders hunched to diminish his height, small changes that added up to invisibility. "You're late, Rodriguez," Rita Morales' voice echoed down the corridor. The night shift supervisor approached with a clipboard, her expression stern for the benefit of anyone watching. At 62, Rita carried herself with the dignity of someone who took pride in her work, regardless of status. 2 days earlier, Ethan had visited her modest Queens apartment, explaining what he needed and why. She'd listened without judgment, then nodded once. "I've cleaned the offices of 3 CEOs in this building," she'd told him. Each one thought his secret stayed behind those big fancy doors. Walls talk, Mr. Sterling. Especially to people others don't notice. Now, she handed him a mop. "Start on 48. Work your way down to 42. Remember, empty trash first, then vacuum, then surfaces. Stay invisible." 48 was executive territory. James's office was on 48. By the way, if you're listening and feeling this story already, you might as well subscribe. Don't be shy, join us. 3 hours later, Ethan had learned more about his company than 6 years of quarterly reports had ever shown him. The night cleaning crew, mostly immigrants from Dominican Republic, Philippines, and Ecuador, worked with efficient precision, sharing quiet conversations in Spanish or Tagalog. They knew which executives worked late, which ones left messes, which ones acknowledged them as human beings. "Mr. Chen, he always says thank you," said Paolo, a Filipino man in his 50s working alongside Ethan. But his office? Disaster. Food containers everywhere. He brings women sometimes, late. Not his wife. Ethan's hand tightened on his mop. Women? Different ones before. But lately, same one. Blonde, expensive perfume. Paolo shrugged. "Not my business. We just clean." The knot in Ethan's stomach tightened. Blonde. Expensive perfume. When the crew moved to the next floor, Ethan lingered, slipping into James's corner office. The desk was immaculate now, but the small trash can told stories, premium whiskey miniatures, high-end chocolate wrappers from a boutique shop Vanessa favored, and a crumpled post-it with what looked like times and dates. Ethan smoothed it carefully. Thursday, 11:30. The same night from the anonymous email. A sound in the hallway sent him quickly back to mopping, just as the office door opened. "Oh, sorry, didn't know anyone was still cleaning." James Chen stood in the doorway, tie loosened, looking slightly startled at finding someone in his office at midnight. Ethan kept his head down, heart hammering. Would his oldest friend recognize him? James barely glanced at him, moving to his desk to retrieve a forgotten phone. "You can finish this tomorrow," he said dismissively, waving Ethan away. "Yes, sir," Ethan mumbled, altering his voice, keeping his eyes on the floor. James brushed past him, already dialing his phone. Ethan caught fragments as James walked down the hall. "Can't wait to see you, bring the view, click what we like." No, he doesn't suspect anything. Ethan stood frozen, the mop forgotten in his hands. 6 years of friendship. Countless business trips, strategy sessions, family dinners. James was godfather to Ethan's nephew, for God's sake. The betrayal felt physical, like a blade between his ribs. At 2 a.m., the night crew gathered in the maintenance break room for lunch. Ethan sat quietly, listening as Rita distributed assignments for the second half of shift. "Rodriguez, you'll do the executive bathroom on 42, then the CEO's office suite." His office. Where he'd spent thousands of hours building his company. Where his actual desk chair cost more than this entire crew made in a month. The executive floor was silent and dark when Ethan entered. He flicked on just enough lights to work, moving through the familiar space as if seeing it for the first time. The artwork on the walls, selected by Vanessa. The arrangement of furniture, suggested by Vanessa. Even the goddamn plants, Vanessa's choice. Had his entire life been curated by a woman who was betraying him? The door to his private bathroom was ajar. Standard procedure was to clean it, restock toiletries, and move on. But something made Ethan pause. The air smelled faintly of Vanessa's perfume, not the one she usually wore, but the newer, stronger scent he'd noticed recently. In the wastebasket, partially hidden under paper towels, an empty condom wrapper. Ethan's breath caught. He hadn't been intimate with Vanessa in months. Methodically, like the detective he'd become, Ethan searched his own office. In the credenza where he kept spare shirts, a cufflink that wasn't his. Platinum with a jade inset. James's style, not his. In his private bar, 2 crystal glasses with lipstick and fingerprints, hastily rinsed but not properly washed. An empty bottle of Veuve Clicquot, Vanessa's favorite champagne. And in his desk drawer, where he kept company credit card statements before sending them to accounting, hotel charges. Hundreds of dollars at the Four Seasons. Room service for 2. Charges on days he'd been traveling. The pain was excruciating, but something colder was taking over. The part of him that had survived poverty, fought through Harvard on scholarship, and built a tech empire from nothing. The strategist. The survivor. Mr. Sterling. Rita stood in the doorway, concern etching her weathered face. "I found something you should see," she said quietly, handing him her phone. The security cameras in the executive elevator have a blind spot. The camera tilts away for routine maintenance every night at 11 p.m. It's on a schedule. But there's another camera in the hallway that catches the reflection in the brass directory. The video showed the elevator opening. Vanessa stepping out, checking her reflection in a compact. And then James, following close behind, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back as they moved toward Ethan's office. "This is from last Thursday," Rita said. "While you were in Tokyo." Ethan's hands were steady as he gave back the phone, even as his world collapsed around him. "There's more," Rita hesitated. "The security logs show Mrs. Sterling's access card has been used at night at least twice a week for the past 3 months. Always when you're away. 3 months. While he'd been closing the biggest deal of his career, his wife and best friend had been using his own office to betray him. "Thank you, Rita," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I think I'll need your help a little longer." That night, as Ethan rode the subway back to a modest hotel where he'd checked in as Michael Rodriguez, the CEO of Sterling Innovations disappeared, and the invisible janitor was born. The transformation was remarkable. For 5 days, Ethan Sterling, Billionaire, CEO, face of Sterling Innovations, became Mike Rodriguez, night janitor, invisible man. The same executives who nervously straightened their ties when Ethan entered a room now walked past him without a glance. The same administrative assistants who carefully prepared his coffee each morning now left their mugs for him to wash, contents half-finished, lipstick on the rim. On Wednesday night, Ethan pushed his cleaning cart past the glass-walled conference room where the executive team was working late. Through the glass, he could see James leading the meeting, standing exactly where Ethan usually stood. James wore a new Bryony suit, the same brand Ethan favored, but in a bolder cut. The janitorial budget is bloated, James was saying, pointing to a spreadsheet. We're spending too much on these services. I recommend we outsource to a cheaper vendor. Beside him, Lawrence Peters, the operations director, nodded. Agreed. These people are interchangeable anyway. We could save $500,000 annually. These people. Interchangeable. Ethan thought of Rita with her 20 years of loyal service. Paolo supporting 2 families on his salary. Maria putting her daughter through college one scrubbed toilet at a time. Rodriguez. Peters spotted him through the glass. We need these trash cans emptied now. Ethan lowered his head and entered, feeling every eye dismiss him as he moved around the table collecting waste baskets. These were men and women he'd hired. People he'd promoted, mentored, trusted with his company's future. As I was saying, James continued as if Ethan were truly invisible. With Ethan taking more time off recently, we need to prepare the board for a possible leadership transition. Ethan's hand froze over a waste basket. He's been unfocused, agreed Diane Slattery, the HR director. Missing meetings, making erratic decisions. Between us, I'm concerned. His wife called me last week, Lawrence added. She's worried about his mental state. Says he's paranoid, having mood swings. James nodded gravely. It happens. The pressure at this level breaks some people. After the board meeting next Friday, I think we should suggest he take a leave of absence. For his own good, of course. Of course, the room murmured in agreement. Ethan felt cold fury building as he left with the trash. These were the same executives who'd celebrated with him just months ago when they'd closed the Jensen acquisition. Who'd raised glasses to his vision at the company Christmas party. They always talk like that when the cleaning staff is around, Rita said later, finding him in the supply closet, white-knuckling a mop handle. Like we're furniture. Or deaf? How long have they been planning this? Ethan asked. Rita's eyes were wise and sad. Your CFO started bringing her here about 3 months ago. At first, just late dinners in his office. Then, more. When they started using your office, I knew it wasn't just an affair. 3 months. The timeline matched what he'd discovered. But why? James already had wealth, position, influence. And Vanessa, she had everything money could buy. If you're watching this and haven't subscribed yet, don't break my heart like that. Tap the button. Let's keep growing together. Thursday night brought the answer. Ethan was emptying recycling bins on the finance floor when he noticed a discrepancy. The bins contained shredded documents, normal for finance, but one bin under the desk of James's executive assistant held fragments that were only partially shredded. The machine had jammed, leaving strips of paper intact enough to read fragments. Methodically, Ethan collected these pieces, smuggling them out in a trash bag. In the maintenance room toilet, he pieced them together like a puzzle. The documents revealed wire transfers to accounts with names like Future Children Foundation and Global Wellness Initiative. Charitable organizations, apparently, receiving hundreds of thousands of dollars from Sterling Innovations. Except Ethan had never heard of these charities, despite personally approving all major philanthropic efforts. With Rita's help, he gained access to the company's financial database using an administrative password that hadn't been changed in years. The security oversight would have infuriated him as CEO. As an investigating janitor, it was a gift. The transfers had begun exactly 3 months and 2 weeks ago, immediately after the Jensen acquisition had boosted the company's stock value by 40%. Money flowed from Sterling Innovations to these supposed charities, then disappeared into offshore accounts. But the most damning evidence came when Ethan cross-referenced the dates with Vanessa's social calendar. Every charity gala she'd chaired or attended in recent months corresponded with these fraudulent organizations. Her Instagram was filled with photos at these events, always tagging the charities, always wearing new designer outfits. They weren't just embezzling from his company, they were building a public cover story through Vanessa's carefully curated social media presence. "I found something else," Rita said, joining him in the small break room where he'd spread out his evidence. She handed him a phone, not his or hers. "Housekeeping found this in the executive women's restroom last night. It was under the sink cabinet. Thought it was lost, but it's password protected." The phone was expensive, with a distinctive emerald case Ethan recognized with a sinking heart. He'd given it to Vanessa for Christmas. "She must have a backup," he murmured. "She's been posting all day." This would be her secondary phone. The private one. The password took 3 attempts. Their anniversary date didn't work. Neither did her birthday. On a hunch, he tried James's birthday. The phone unlocked. For the next hour, Ethan read 3 years of texts between his wife and his CFO. 3 years, not 3 months. The affair had begun just 1 year into Vanessa's marriage to Ethan, around the time Sterling Innovations had gone public and Ethan's net worth had crossed into billions. The messages painted a devastating picture. The early texts were purely sexual, both of them getting off on the danger, the secret meetings. Then money entered the conversations. James advising Vanessa on how to ask Ethan for more allowance, more jewelry, more real estate. "He's so desperate to prove he belongs in our world," Vanessa had written. "It's almost too easy. Keep him happy for now," James had responded. "Once I have full access to the financial systems, we'll move to Phase 2. Phase 2 had obviously begun 3 months ago. The embezzlement. The undermining of Ethan's leadership. The whispers to board members about his stability. But the most recent texts revealed the endgame. Vanessa, the lawyer, confirmed it. If he's declared mentally incompetent, the prenup is void. I get half of everything, including his company shares. James, the board already thinks he's unstable. After his episode or at the meeting next Friday, they'll demand he step aside. I'll be named interim CEO. Vanessa, and once you control the company and I control the shares. James, we'll have everything. And he'll have nothing. Just like he deserves." Ethan set the phone down, his hands perfectly steady despite the roaring in his ears. "Mr. Sterling." Rita's voice seemed to come from far away. "They've been playing me for years," he said quietly. "Using me. Stealing from me. And now they want to take everything I've built. What will you do?" "What indeed?" The obvious move was to confront them immediately, present the evidence to the board, fire James, divorce Vanessa. But that would merely stop their plan. After everything he discovered about the people he'd trusted most, stopping them wasn't enough. First, Ethan said, the strategist in him taking control, "I need to understand exactly how deep this goes. Who on the board is involved? Who else on my executive team? And exactly how much have they stolen?" He picked up Vanessa's phone again, scrolling to the calendar. "Tomorrow night. 8 p.m. They're meeting in my office again." He looked at Rita, his expression hardening. "And this time, I'll be waiting for them." Friday night. The Sterling Innovations Tower stood like a gleaming sentinel against the Manhattan skyline, most floors dark except for scattered offices where ambitious employees worked late. On the executive floor, only security lights illuminated the corridor leading to the CEO's suite. Ethan arrived early, his janitor's uniform now feeling like armor rather than a disguise. With Rita's help, he'd planted small recording devices behind air vents, beneath the credenza, inside the desk lamp. Nothing would be missed tonight. Remember, Rita cautioned as she helped him prepare, no matter what you hear, stay hidden. These people are dangerous, they're trying to destroy you. If they discover who you really are. Ethan nodded, understanding the risk. He'd created a small observation point, a supply closet adjacent to his office with a ventilation panel that allowed him to see and hear everything. At 7:45, the executive elevator chimed. From his hiding place, Ethan watched Vanessa step out first. She'd clearly come from a salon, her blonde hair freshly styled, makeup perfect. She wore a crimson dress he'd bought her for her birthday last year, paired with diamond earrings from their anniversary. All purchased with his money. All worn now for another man. James arrived 5 minutes later, carrying a bottle of champagne and a small briefcase. Ethan recognized the champagne, a $900 bottle of vintage Dom Perignon he kept stocked in his home cellar. They entered his office without turning on the main lights, using only his desk lamp and the city glow from the windows. James pulled Vanessa into a kiss that made Ethan's stomach clench. When they separated, both were laughing. "I can't believe he still hasn't noticed his private stash of Dom is disappearing," James said, popping the cork. "The man has billions but still counts his bottles like a shopkeeper." "Ethan notices money, not quality," Vanessa replied, accepting a glass. "He can tell you the price of everything in our apartment but couldn't identify a single artist on our walls." The casual contempt in her voice made Ethan flinch. How many times had she smiled at him while harboring such disdain? James settled into Ethan's chair, and propped his feet on the desk. "The board is prepped. Lawrence and Diane have been sharing their concerns about Ethan's erratic behavior. 3 other directors texted me today, asking if we should consider temporary leadership changes. And they're suggesting you, naturally," Vanessa purred, perching on the desk near James's feet. "Who else? I've been running this company in all but name for years while your husband takes credit." James opened his briefcase. "The documents are ready. Once he's declared temporarily incapacitated, I'll be named interim CEO. The board votes next Friday." Vanessa took a folder from the briefcase, scanning its contents with a satisfied smile. "And the medication? Is it still working?" Ethan went cold. "Perfectly," James replied. 2 drops in his evening scotch, and within 30 minutes, he's disoriented, paranoid, eventually sleepy. The beauty is, it metabolizes completely within hours. Untraceable. And the side effects build over time, Vanessa added. The doctors will find nothing in tests, but everyone around him sees a man unraveling. Mood swings. Memory lapses. Paranoia. They were drugging him. The strange episodes he'd experienced over the past months, the disorientation during important calls, the memory gaps in meetings, the sudden exhaustion, hadn't been stress or overwork. "The last dose I gave him was Tuesday night," Vanessa continued. "He was supposed to lead the product strategy meeting Wednesday morning. Did he embarrass himself?" James laughed. "Completely fell apart. Could barely remember the basic projections we'd reviewed a dozen times. Lawrence suggested he see a doctor. It was perfect. Before we continue, can I ask a tiny favor? Hit that subscribe button. It means more than you know." They clinked glasses, celebrating the systematic destruction of his reputation, his company, his life. "What about the offshore accounts?" Vanessa asked, moving to sit in James's lap. "How much have we moved?" James nuzzled her neck. 12 million so far. Small enough amounts to avoid attention, large enough to be worth our time. Once I'm CEO, we'll accelerate the process. Your fake charities are the perfect cover. No one questions where donations go. My mother always said to marry rich, but she never specified for how long. Vanessa laughed, a sound that had once delighted Ethan but now cut like a blade. 3 more weeks, and half of everything he owns becomes mine. Including his voting shares. Which you'll sign over to me, James added. Of course, darling. I have no interest in running a company. Just spending its profits. She ran her fingers through his hair. We'll sell the New York properties. I never liked them anyway. Keep the house in Aspen for skiing, the villa in Capri for summer. The rest can be liquidated. They were dismantling his life, piece by piece, planning it like a holiday itinerary. What will he do when he realizes? James asked, refilling their glasses. When he has nothing left. Vanessa shrugged, unconcerned. He'll survive. That's what he does, the cockroach from Queens who wouldn't die. He'll probably build another company to prove himself worthy of the world that never wanted him. The words struck Ethan like physical blows. 8 years of marriage distilled into such naked contempt. Did you ever love him? James asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. Vanessa's laugh was cold. Love? God, no. He was my ticket out of debt. My parents had lost everything, the gallery was failing. He was convenient, nouveau riche and desperate to belong. She sipped her champagne. You should have seen him in the beginning, so eager to please, so grateful I'd chosen him. Pathetic, really. And in bed? James prompted, his hand sliding up her thigh. Disappointing, Vanessa's voice dripped with mockery. So earnest. Always asking if I'd finished, if it was good for me. I became quite the actress. They laughed together, and Ethan felt something inside him break. Not his heart, that had already shattered. Something deeper. His faith in human connection. His belief that he'd found love despite his focused ambition. The look on his face when they tell him he's being removed as CEO, James mused. I wish I could frame it. I'll be playing the concerned wife, Vanessa said. So devoted, so worried about his mental health. The prenup is void if he's declared incompetent. The lawyers confirmed it. And if he fights back? He won't, Vanessa said with certainty. His greatest weakness isn't his background or his social awkwardness. It's that he still believes people are fundamentally good. That trust can be given instead of earned. She straddled James now, her dress riding up. He won't see the blade until it's buried in his back. As they began to make love on his desk, Ethan silently activated the recording devices with his phone. Every word, every betrayal, every plan captured in high-definition audio and video. His mind felt strangely calm, detached from the pain that should have overwhelmed him. This wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just embezzlement. It was a calculated, years-long conspiracy to take everything he'd built, to strip him of his company, his wealth, his reputation, and his dignity. In the maintenance room later, Rita found him sitting perfectly still, staring at the wall. Mr. Sterling, she asked gently. Did you learn what you needed to know? When he looked up, Rita took an involuntary step back. The man before her wasn't broken. His eyes didn't show defeat or devastation. They burned with something far more dangerous, cold, focused clarity. More than enough, he said quietly. They've stolen 3 years of my life. They've drugged me, betrayed me, plotted against me, and laughed while doing it. He stood slowly. But they made a critical mistake. What's that? They thought the janitor was invisible. Ethan's smile was terrible in its calmness. But the invisible man sees everything. That night, as Ethan left through the service entrance, Mike Rodriguez, the janitor, died. In his place, Ethan Sterling was reborn, not as the trusting, grateful man who believed in his wife and best friend, but as someone far more dangerous. Someone with nothing left to lose. Saturday morning found Ethan in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Queens, 10 blocks from where he'd grown up. The contrast between this place and his penthouse couldn't have been more stark: water stains on the ceiling, a mattress on the floor, mismatched furniture that came with the month-to-month rental. He sat on the windowsill, watching rain streak the glass, a burner phone in his hand displaying headlines. Sterling Innovation stock drops amid leadership concerns. Tech billionaire Ethan Sterling takes unexpected leave of absence. Sources say Sterling Innovation's CEO exhibiting erratic behavior. He texted his mother only, "I'm fine. Working through something." We'll explain soon. Love you. To everyone else, Ethan Sterling had simply vanished. He'd spent the night reviewing the recordings, downloading company files, gathering evidence. The scope of their betrayal was breathtaking. Beyond the embezzlement and the affair, James had been systematically undermining Ethan's business decisions for at least 2 years, sabotaging potential acquisitions that would have strengthened Ethan's position, promoting allies into key roles, isolating executives loyal to Ethan. And Vanessa, her calculated deception cut deepest. Every anniversary card, every I love you, every intimate moment, all lies. Performance art from a woman who saw him as nothing more than an ATM and stepping stone. When had he become so blind? So desperate for connection that he'd missed what now seemed obvious? A knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. Delivery for Rodriguez, called a voice. Ethan opened the door to find a courier with a thick manila envelope. Inside was a burner laptop, clean and untraceable, courtesy of the only person he'd contacted, a college friend who now specialized in cybersecurity, no questions asked. Settle in, get comfortable, and if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. You're safe here. By afternoon, the rain had turned to sleet, matching Ethan's darkening mood. The burner laptop displayed his life unraveling in real time. An emergency board meeting had been called for Monday morning. The official reason, discussion of leadership transition due to health concerns. His phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa, everyone's worried sick. Where are you? Please come home so we can talk. I love you. The calculated concern, the false love, it made his stomach turn. Another text followed from James, buddy, whatever's going on, we can fix it. The board just wants to help. Call me. Ethan hurled the phone against the wall, watching as the screen shattered. Just like his life. A deeper search of company records revealed more. The embezzlement wasn't limited to the fake charities. James had been skimming from the employee pension fund as well, small amounts from thousands of accounts, adding up to millions. Money meant for the retirement of loyal workers, people like Rita and Paolo, stolen by a man who already had more than he could spend. By evening, exhaustion overtook him. Ethan collapsed onto the mattress, his mind still racing. When had he last slept properly? Before the drugging began, perhaps. His body felt foreign to him, hollow and heavy simultaneously. For the first time since discovering the betrayal, Ethan allowed himself to feel the full weight of it. Not just anger, but grief. Loss. Humiliation. He'd started with nothing, built an empire, and thought he'd found love along the way. Now it was all revealed as illusion. Every success tainted by betrayal. Every moment of happiness poisoned by lies. What if they were right? What if he was just the cockroach from Queens who'd gotten lucky? A fraud who'd convinced himself he belonged in their world? Sunday morning brought news that sank him lower. TMZ published photos of Vanessa leaving their penthouse, teary-eyed, carrying designer luggage. The caption, "Trouble in Tech Paradise?" Billionaire's wife moves out as his company faces crisis. Another headline, from a business publication, Sterling Innovations prepares for leadership change, CFO James Chen expected to step in. They were moving faster than he'd anticipated. Creating a public narrative of a man falling apart while his loyal wife and friend tried to help him. A text notification appeared on his laptop, a secure messaging app he'd installed. Rita, they're packing up your office. She's supervising. Vanessa was removing his belongings from his own company. The final indignity. Ethan, let them take it all. Rita, will you be at the board meeting tomorrow? Ethan stared at the question, unsure how to respond. What was the point? They had positioned everything perfectly, his erratic behavior, caused by their drugging, his sudden disappearance, caused by their betrayal. If he showed up ranting about conspiracies and embezzlement, wouldn't that just confirm their narrative? Maybe it would be easier to walk away. Start over somewhere. He still had offshore accounts they couldn't access. Enough to live comfortably, if not extravagantly. The thought brought a bitter laugh. He'd been poor before. He could be poor again. But to let them win, to let them take what he'd built through years of sacrifice and vision. The knock at his door was soft but insistent. When Ethan opened it, Rita stood there, concern etching her weathered face. "How did you find me?" he asked, stepping back to let her in. "I've lived in Queens my whole life," she replied simply, looking around the sparse apartment. "You didn't hide very well for a billionaire." She carried a small cooler, which she set on the kitchen counter. "Figured you weren't eating. My husband Hector always said no one thinks straight on an empty stomach." The simple act of kindness, homemade empanadas and arroz con gandules, nearly broke him. When was the last time someone had cared for him without wanting something in return? They ate in silence for a few minutes, sitting on mismatched chairs at a wobbly table. "You're giving up," Rita finally said. "Not a question." Ethan looked away. "They've won. The board believes them. The press believes them. By this time tomorrow, I'll be the crazy ex-CEO who had a breakdown. So you'll let them take everything you built? Everything you fought for? What choice do I have?" His voice rose. "Show up tomorrow and tell them my wife and CFO have been drugging me and stealing from the company? That they've been sleeping together for years? I'll sound exactly like the paranoid, unstable man they've portrayed me as." Rita regarded him steadily. 27 years ago, my husband and I owned a small grocery store in Washington Heights. Not much, but it was ours. We'd built it from nothing, just like you. Then my husband's brother asked to become a partner. Family, you know? We trusted him. Ethan grew quiet, sensing where this was going. 6 months later, the store was bankrupt. His brother had been stealing from us, little by little. When we confronted him, he'd already transferred everything to his name. The legal papers we'd signed, papers he'd helped us with because his English was better, gave him control. Her eyes held a distant pain. We lost everything. Hector never recovered. The shame broke him. He died 5 years later, still believing he'd failed his family. "I'm sorry," Ethan said quietly. "I wanted to give up too," Rita continued. "But I had 3 children to feed. No education beyond high school. So I cleaned offices at night, houses during the day. 80 hours a week sometimes." She leaned forward. "You know what kept me going? Not the money. Not even my children, though they gave me purpose. It was knowing that I wasn't what my brother-in-law made me feel like, a victim. A fool." She reached across the table, her hand surprisingly strong as it gripped his. "You are not what they say you are. Not the naive husband. Not the incompetent CEO. You built something real. Something important. And no one has the right to take that from you." "But how do I fight this?" Ethan asked, the hopelessness in his voice surprising even him. "They've been planning this for years. The same way you built your company. The same way I raised my children alone. One step at a time." Rita stood, gathering their plates. "Start by remembering who you are." "And who is that?" he asked bitterly. "The cockroach from Queens who wouldn't die." Rita's expression hardened. "No. You're the man who started with nothing and built something that matters. The man who remembers the night cleaning staff's names when billionaires walk past us like we're furniture." She pointed at him. "The fighter who's going to get up off this floor and show those thieves what happens when they steal from the wrong person." Something stirred in Ethan's chest, a familiar fire that had fueled him through poverty, through college, through 1,000 investor rejections and technical failures. The will to fight. To survive. To win. "They think they've beaten you," Rita said. "And that's their weakness." As Rita left, Ethan stood at the window, watching night fall over Queens. The same view he'd seen as a child, dreaming of something more. They'd taken his company, his marriage, his reputation. But they couldn't take the one thing that had gotten him this far. His refusal to stay down when knocked to the ground. Slowly, deliberately, Ethan picked up the burner phone. He had calls to make. Plans to set in motion. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Monday morning arrived with steel-grey determination. Ethan stood before the cracked mirror in his rented apartment, clean-shaven, his hair restored to its natural color. The janitor's uniform lay discarded on the floor. Instead, he wore what Vanessa had once called his battlesuit, a custom Tom Ford in charcoal, white shirt, no tie. The armor of a tech CEO who meant business. 3 days of invisibility had given him something invaluable: perspective. They'd shown him truths about his company, his marriage, and himself that he might never have discovered from the executive suite. Now it was time to use that knowledge. His first call went to Andrew Matlock, his personal attorney for 12 years. Not the company lawyers, they reported to the board. Andrew was the one person who owed loyalty solely to Ethan. "Jesus Christ, Ethan, where have you been?" Andrew answered. "The business world thinks you're having a breakdown. I need you to clear your schedule today. And I need absolute confidentiality. Not even your partners can know." Andrew hesitated only briefly. "My office or yours?" "Neither. There's a diner in Queens. Angelo's on Steinway Street. 11 o'clock. His second call was to board director Eleanor Whitmore. At 72, Eleanor was the oldest Sterling Innovations board member, a tech pioneer from the 1980s who'd broken barriers for women in Silicon Valley. She'd been one of Ethan's earliest investors when no one else would take his calls. "Ethan, thank God," her voice was sharp with relief. "What the hell is happening?" "Eleanor, who called the emergency board meeting?" "James Chen, backed by Lawrence and Diane. They're saying you've been experiencing episodes. That you've become unstable. And you believe them?" Ethan kept his voice steady. "I've known you since you were a scrawny kid with big ideas and bigger dreams. I know what mental instability looks like, and it's not you." Her voice hardened. "But they have documentation, Ethan. Medical opinions. Witness statements. Your wife is backing their claims. I need you to trust me one more time," Ethan said. "Don't vote on anything today. Stall them. Tell them I've contacted you and promised evidence of serious misconduct by senior executives." "What kind of misconduct?" "The kind that ends with prison sentences." The line went silent as Eleanor absorbed his words. "The meeting's at 2, she finally said. "I'll do what I can. But you better have something concrete, Ethan. They're out for blood." His third call was to a number few people had, the private cell phone of FBI Special Agent Diana Reyes, who headed the Financial Crimes Division for the New York field office. They'd met 5 years earlier when Ethan had reported an attempted hack of Sterling Innovation Systems by international actors. "Sterling," she answered. "This is unexpected. I need to report a major financial crime. Embezzlement, pension fraud, conspiracy. At my company. I assume you have evidence. Enough to put people away for a very long time." Her voice sharpened with interest. "My office, 3 o'clock. The final call was the hardest, to his mother, who'd raised him alone after his father abandoned them, who'd worked multiple jobs to keep him fed and housed, who'd cried with pride at his Harvard graduation and again when Sterling Innovations went public. "Ethan." Her voice was thick with worry. "Are you all right?" "The news is saying." "Mom, I'm okay," he assured her. "I'm handling something complicated right now. But I need you to know, whatever you hear, whatever they say about me, I'm still the son you raised. I'm still fighting." By 11, Ethan sat in a back booth at Angelo's Diner, a greasy spoon that had been serving Queens locals since the 1970s. The place smelled of bacon and coffee, the vinyl seats cracked with age. Andrew arrived looking distinctly out of place in his Savile Row suit. He slid into the booth, concern etched on his face. "You look surprisingly good for a man reportedly having a nervous breakdown." "Because I'm not having one," Ethan replied, sliding a flash drive across the table. "What I am having is a major corporate conspiracy problem. For the next hour, Andrew reviewed the evidence on a secured laptop, the recordings of Vanessa and James, the financial trails of embezzlement, the documented theft from the pension fund, the drugging. "My God, Ethan," Andrew finally said, his face pale. "This is... I don't even have words. They've been systematically destroying me." "Yes." Ethan's voice was calm. "The question is, what do we do about it?" Andrew was already in lawyer mode, making notes. "Criminal charges, obviously. Civil suits. We freeze the accounts they've been using. Get injunctions against." "I don't just want to stop them," Ethan interrupted. "I want to make an example of them. I want everyone who ever thinks about betraying someone's trust this way to remember what happened to Vanessa and James." Before Andrew could respond, the diner door opened. Rita entered, followed by 5 people Ethan recognized from his days as Mike the janitor, Paolo, Maria, Javier, Sophie, and Diego. The night shift team who'd worked alongside him while he was invisible. They approached the booth uncertainly. "You asked us to come, Mrs. Morales," Paolo said. "But why?" He stopped, his eyes widening as he recognized Ethan. "Wait. You're him. The CEO." "And Mike the janitor," Ethan confirmed, standing to shake their hands. "Please, join us." As they pulled chairs to the booth, Rita explained, "Mr. Sterling has learned that someone has been stealing from the employee pension fund. Your retirement money." The shock and anger on their faces cemented Ethan's resolve. These weren't just employees. They were people with families, dreams, futures, all of which James had been stealing, bit by bit. "I'm going to make this right," Ethan promised. "But I need your help. I need people I can trust." By noon, the plan was taking shape. Each person had a role to play, information to gather, positions to take. Andrew would prepare legal documents. Eleanor would stall the board. Rita and her team would secure physical evidence from the building. And Ethan? Ethan would prepare for war. Do you know that you can save a soul right now by subscribing? Every subscription helps us continue sharing stories that matter. At 1:30 p.m., as the Sterling Innovations board gathered for their emergency meeting, a courier delivered sealed envelopes to each member. Inside, copies of financial records showing the systematic embezzlement from company accounts and pension funds, along with a letter from Ethan requesting they take no action until he presented his full evidence at 5 p.m. At 2:45 p.m., as James Chen was confidently telling the board that Ethan's accusations were further evidence of his paranoid delusions, Rita and her team were using their after-hours access codes to secure the physical servers containing the company's financial records, preventing any emergency deletions. At 3:15 p.m., as Vanessa Sterling was giving a tearful interview to a business reporter about her concerns for her husband's mental health, Ethan was laying out his evidence for FBI agent Reyes, who was rapidly assembling a financial crimes task force. And at 4:30 p.m., as Lawrence Peters was suggesting to the board that they change the access codes to Ethan's office and email for his own protection, Ethan Sterling walked through the main lobby of his company for the first time in a week. The security guard straightened, surprised. Employees stopped and stared. Word spread through the building like wildfire, the CEO was back. Ethan walked calmly to the executive elevator, rode it to the top floor, and stepped out to find Emma, his executive assistant, waiting with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Sterling," she whispered. "They said you were." "I know what they said," Ethan replied gently. "Now it's time for the truth." The boardroom doors were closed. Inside, James Chen was speaking, his voice carrying through the temporary leadership transition while Ethan gets the help he clearly needs. Ethan threw the doors open. The room fell silent. 14 board members turned as one, expressions ranging from shock to relief to alarm. James Chen stood at the head of the table, Ethan's place, his presentation frozen on the screen behind him showing a chart titled Leadership Transition Plan. "Ethan," James recovered quickly, his face a mask of concern. "We've been so worried. You shouldn't be here, you should be resting." Ethan smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach his eyes. "I've been resting quite enough, James. Though the drugs you and my wife have been putting in my drinks certainly helped with that." A murmur ran through the board. James's expression flickered just briefly before he forced a sympathetic look. "This is exactly what we're concerned about. These paranoid accusations." "Actually," Eleanor Whitmore interrupted, "I think we should hear what Ethan has to say. Particularly in light of the documents we've all received." Ethan moved to the center of the room. "For the past week, I've been gathering evidence of a conspiracy against both me personally and this company as a whole. What I've discovered is far worse than I imagined." Over the next 30 minutes, Ethan methodically presented his findings, the recordings, the financial trails, the witness statements from the night staff. With each revelation, James's face grew paler. Board members shifted from skepticism to shock to outrage. "This is absurd," James finally sputtered when Ethan finished. "These are obviously fabricated. Ethan is clearly unwell." The boardroom doors opened again. FBI agent Reyes entered, flanked by 2 agents in suits. "James Chen," she said. "We have some questions regarding wire fraud, embezzlement, and pension theft. Would you like to answer them here, or at our office?" As James was escorted out, his face ashen, Ethan turned back to the board. "There will be more revelations in the coming days. The damage is significant but containable. I'll be presenting a full recovery plan tomorrow." He paused, looking at each board member in turn. "But I want to be clear about one thing. This company isn't just quarterly reports and stock prices. It's people. From the executives in this room to the night cleaning staff. Everyone deserves respect. Everyone deserves security." His gaze hardened. "And no one steals from my employees. Not while I'm CEO." The board meeting adjourned with unanimous support for Ethan's continued leadership. But his day wasn't over. As he left the building, Andrew called with news. "We've secured an emergency freezing order on all the accounts, including Vanessa's personal funds. She's being served papers as we speak." "Where is she now?" Ethan asked. "Preparing for her charity gala tonight. The Future Children Foundation event at the Metropolitan Museum. 300 guests, full media coverage." Ethan checked his watch. 7 p.m. Perfect timing. "Tell the FBI to meet me there at 8:30, he said. "It's time for the final act." The woman who had plotted his downfall, who had mocked and betrayed him for years, who had pretended to love him while despising everything about him, was about to host the social event of the season. And Ethan Sterling would be making a very unexpected appearance. The Metropolitan Museum of Art glowed like a jewel against the night sky, its grand entrance flanked by towering columns bathed in blue light, the signature color of the Future Children Foundation. Stretch limousines and luxury SUVs disgorged Manhattan's elite onto the red carpet, women in designer gowns, men in custom tuxedos, all air-kissing and posing for photographers. At the center of it all stood Vanessa Sterling, resplendent in a sapphire Valentino gown, diamonds glittering at her throat, wrists, and ears. She smiled radiantly for the cameras, the picture of philanthropic grace, the devoted wife raising millions for children in need while her troubled husband sought treatment for his health issues. "Mrs. Sterling." "Over here," called the photographers. "Is Ethan here tonight?" "Unfortunately, my husband couldn't join us," Vanessa answered with perfectly practiced concern. "He's taking some time to focus on his health. I ask that everyone respect our privacy during this difficult period." Inside, the museum's grand hall had been transformed into a wonderland of light and luxury. Ice sculptures of the foundation's logo, a stylized child's hand reaching upward, stood alongside elaborate flower arrangements worth thousands. Waiters circulated with champagne and canapes. A string quartet played softly in the corner. At $50,000 per table, the event had raised over $2 million for the charity. Money that would never reach a single child in need. By 8:15, the gala was in full swing. Vanessa floated through the crowd, accepting condolences about her husband's condition with dignified grace. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The board meeting had gone perfectly. James had texted that Ethan had been removed as CEO, with James named as interim replacement. In less than a month, once the psychiatric evaluations were complete, the prenup would be void. She'd have half of everything. On the museum's grand staircase, Vanessa clinked to crystal glass for attention. The crowd quieted as she began her speech. "Welcome, friends. Your generosity tonight will change children's lives forever." As she spoke about hope and compassion, words scripted by the PR team she paid with embezzled funds, she noticed a commotion at the entrance. Security guards were speaking into their earpieces, looking concerned. Vanessa faltered slightly but continued, "The Future Children Foundation believes that every child deserves." The grand door swung open. Ethan Sterling stood framed in the doorway, still in his battle suit, his expression calm but determined. Behind him stood a phalanx of FBI agents in dark suits, badges visible. To his right, Andrew Matlock held a leather portfolio. To his left, Eleanor Whitmore surveyed the scene with regal disapproval. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Photographers spun, cameras flashing. "Ethan!" Vanessa's voice caught, the microphone amplifying her shock. "What are you?" "Please, continue your speech, Vanessa," Ethan said, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. "Tell these generous people exactly where their donations are going tonight." He moved forward, the crowd parting before him like water. FBI agents positioned themselves at exits. Andrew and Eleanor flanked him as he climbed the stairs until he stood beside his wife. "What are you doing?" Vanessa hissed, her smile frozen in place. "You're supposed to be having a breakdown? Being removed as CEO? Drugged into submission?" Ethan took the microphone gently from her hand. "I'm afraid there's been a change of plans." He turned to the stunned crowd, many of whom were already recording with their phones. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for interrupting this beautiful event. But I believe in transparency. And you deserve to know exactly what your $50,000 tables are funding tonight." With a nod to Andrew, large screens around the hall, meant for a touching video about the foundation's work, came to life. Instead, they displayed financial records, wire transfers, offshore account numbers. "The Future Children Foundation does not exist," Ethan announced. "It's a shell company created to launder money embezzled from Sterling Innovations. Along with 5 other fake charities my wife has been chairing over the past 3 months." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Vanessa's face drained of color. "Ethan, you're unwell," she said loudly, trying to take back the microphone. "Everyone, my husband has been suffering from paranoid delusions." "Interesting you should mention that," Ethan replied, holding up a small vial. "This was found in our home bar. A sophisticated compound that, when mixed with alcohol, produces symptoms remarkably similar to mental instability. The FBI lab confirmed it this afternoon." Vanessa took a step back, her eyes darting toward the exits, all blocked by agents. "My wife and my former CFO, James Chen, who was arrested 3 hours ago, have been systematically drugging me for months," Ethan continued, his voice steady. "Creating the appearance of instability while they embezzled over $12 million from my company and prepared to seize control of everything I've built." The screens changed to show text messages between Vanessa and James, carefully edited to remove the most intimate details but clearly showing their conspiracy. Vanessa's face contorted with rage, the mask of concern shattering. "You can't prove any of this," she hissed, lunging for the microphone. "Actually, we can," said a new voice. FBI agent Reyes climbed the stairs, holding up her badge for all to see. "Mrs. Sterling, we have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy, wire fraud, grand larceny, and unlawful administration of a controlled substance." As Agent Reyes recited Miranda rights to a shell-shocked Vanessa, Ethan addressed the crowd again. "I want to assure everyone here that you haven't been funding a criminal enterprise knowingly. All donations will be returned in full." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "But I would ask you to consider redirecting those funds to legitimate children's charities that could use your support. Why haven't you subscribed?" Don't you like the story? Every subscription helps us bring more real, authentic stories to light. The crowd watched in stunned silence as Vanessa Sterling, social darling, charity maven, perfect corporate wife, was handcuffed and escorted down the grand staircase, her sapphire gown sweeping behind her like a fallen queen's train. As she passed Ethan, she leaned in, her voice venomous though only he could hear it. "You think this is over? I still have the best lawyers money can buy." "Your money?" Ethan smiled slightly. "Not anymore. The prenup is quite clear about criminal activity and infidelity. You'll be fortunate to keep the clothes you're wearing tonight." He leaned closer. "Though I'm not sure Valentino translates well to prison orange." The media frenzy was immediate and overwhelming. As Vanessa was escorted out, reporters shouted questions from all sides. Camera lights flashed like lightning. But the most dramatic moment was yet to come. As the crowd buzzed with shock and scandal, the museum's side entrance opened. Rita entered, followed by Paolo, Maria, and a dozen other members of Sterling Innovation's night cleaning crew, all in their uniforms, all looking uncomfortably out of place among the gala's glittering attendees. Ethan beckoned them forward. "These are the real victims of my wife and James Chen's crimes," he announced. While they stole millions for fake charities and luxury lifestyles, they were also systematically draining the pension fund that would secure these hard-working people's futures. He gestured to the group now standing awkwardly at the foot of the stairs. "Rita Morales has cleaned our offices for 20 years. Paulo Delgado for 15. Maria Gutierrez for 12. They arrive when most of us have gone home and leave before we arrive. They're invisible to many of us, as I myself was when I worked alongside them last week." A ripple of surprise went through the crowd at this revelation. "Yes, that's right," Ethan confirmed. "When I received anonymous information about potential wrongdoing, I didn't call the authorities immediately. I became a janitor in my own company to discover the truth firsthand." He descended the stairs to stand with Rita and her team. "What I learned changed everything. Not just about my wife and CFO's betrayal, but about how we value, or fail to value, the people who make our success possible." As flash bulbs popped and reporters frantically took notes, Ethan made a commitment that would be headline news by morning. "Sterling Innovations is creating a new employee ownership program, starting with our service staff. 20% of company shares will be transferred to an employee trust, ensuring that everyone who contributes to our success shares in it. Beginning with making whole the pension funds that were stolen, with interest." The night that was meant to be Vanessa's social triumph and the final step in Ethan's downfall instead became the launchpad for a corporate revolution. By midnight, #Janitor CEO was trending worldwide. Business analysts were declaring it either brilliant PR or financial suicide, sometimes in the same breath. But for Ethan, standing with Rita and her team as they were served the same champagne and canapes as the billionaires around them, it wasn't about publicity. It was about remembering who he really was. Not the cockroach from Queens who wouldn't die, but the builder who'd never forgotten where he came from. As the gala broke up, Eleanor Whitmore approached him. "Quite a show," the veteran board member said. "The board will have questions about this employee ownership plan." "They'll have answers tomorrow," Ethan replied. "And I expect their full support." Eleanor smiled slightly. "After tonight's performance? I don't think anyone is eager to cross you." She studied him with shrewd eyes. "You know, I've been in business for 50 years. Seen all kinds of leaders. The ones who last aren't the smartest or the most innovative. Who are they, then? The ones who remember that companies aren't balance sheets or stock prices. They're people." She patted his arm. "You had to lose everything to remember that. Don't forget it again." As Ethan left the museum that night, reporters shouted questions. What would happen to Vanessa and James? How had he discovered their plot? Was Sterling Innovation stable? But only one question gave him pause. "Mr. Sterling, after such betrayal, how can you ever trust anyone again?" Ethan thought of Rita, who'd risked her job to help him. Paolo and Maria, who'd gathered evidence at his request despite barely knowing him. Eleanor, who'd believed in him when evidence suggested she shouldn't. Trust isn't given blindly, he answered. It's earned through actions, not words. I learned that lesson the hard way. He smiled slightly. But I also learned that real loyalty exists in the places you least expect to find it. As his car pulled away, Ethan looked back at the museum, still glowing blue against the night sky. The gala meant to celebrate his downfall had instead become the stage for his greatest comeback. And somewhere across town, in a holding cell at FBI headquarters, Vanessa Sterling was discovering what Ethan had known since childhood. The most dangerous mistake you can make is underestimating someone because of where they came from. 6 months later, spring sunshine streamed through the windows of Ethan Sterling's office, a different office, in a different building. After the scandal that tabloids had dubbed Operation Janitor, Sterling Innovations had undergone a complete transformation, starting with its headquarters. The new campus sat in Long Island City, Queens, just 15 minutes from where Ethan had grown up. The gleaming building featured an open floor plan, transparent glass offices, and most importantly, no executive floor separated from everyone else. The CEO worked among his people, not above them. The Wall Street Journal lay open on Ethan's desk, featuring a story that would have been unimaginable half a year earlier. Sterling Innovations stock reaches all-time high as its employee-owned model proves successful. The article detailed how the company's revolutionary structure, with 20% employee ownership and profit sharing for all staff, had not destroyed value as critics predicted, but created it. Productivity was up, turnover down, and innovation flourishing in ways that had competitors scrambling to keep pace. "Mr. Sterling? Your 10 o'clock is here," his assistant called through the intercom. "Send them in," Ethan replied, standing to greet the visitors. The door opened to reveal a group of business students from Queens College, wide-eyed and nervous as they entered the office of a man who'd become something of a business legend over the past 6 months. "Welcome to Sterling Innovations," Ethan said warmly. "I understand you're doing a case study on corporate ethics and governance." "Yes, sir," their professor replied. "Your company has become the central example in our curriculum." Ethan gestured for them to sit. "Then let's start with what you really want to know. What happened to the people who betrayed me?" The students leaned forward eagerly. James Chen had pled guilty to 16 federal charges including wire fraud, embezzlement, and pension theft. The evidence had been overwhelming. His testimony against other conspirators, including 2 board members and the HR director who'd helped undermine Ethan, had reduced his sentence from 25 years to 15. He was currently serving his time at a federal prison in Pennsylvania. "The last I heard, he's teaching basic accounting to other inmates," Ethan told the students with a hint of irony. Vanessa's case had been more complex. After initially proclaiming her innocence, she'd eventually accepted a plea deal, 8 years for her role in the conspiracy, with the possibility of parole after 5. The divorce had been finalized 3 months ago. As Ethan had predicted, the prenuptial agreement's infidelity and criminal activity clauses had left her with nothing. The fake charities. Ethan continued. "We tracked every dollar. Most of the money has been recovered and redirected to legitimate organizations doing real work for children in need. But the most dramatic changes had come within Sterling Innovations itself. The first thing I did was promote Rita Morales to Vice President of Operations," Ethan explained. Her decades of observing how the company actually functioned, not how executives thought it functioned, made her uniquely qualified to identify inefficiencies and improve working conditions. Rita's first initiative had been simple but revolutionary. All executives now spent 1 day each quarter working alongside the service staff, cleaning offices, staffing reception desks, sorting mail. Invisible work, as Rita called it, became visible to those making decisions. "We also completely restructured compensation," Ethan continued. "The ratio between my salary and our lowest paid employee used to be 320 to 1. Now it's 20 to 1. Still significant, but a lot more reasonable. Perhaps most importantly, the company now operated with radical transparency. All salaries were public information. Board meetings were recorded and available to all employees. Financial statements were published internally each month, with plain language explanations of what the numbers meant. Trust was broken in my company because secrecy allowed it to happen, Ethan explained to the students. Darkness breeds corruption. Light prevents it. As the students filed out an hour later, Ethan's phone chimed with a personal notification. He smiled slightly at the message. 6 months ago, he'd have said he'd never trust anyone romantically again. But life had a way of surprising you. Her name was Claire, a professor of ethics at Columbia who'd reached out after reading about the Sterling Innovations transformation. Their first meeting had been for her research, their second had been for coffee, their third had been dinner. They'd been seeing each other for 2 months now, cautiously, honestly, both aware of the wounds they carried from previous relationships. Still on for dinner tonight, her message read. Looking forward to it, he replied. Unlike with Vanessa, Ethan wasn't trying to impress Claire with wealth or status. She'd seen his apartment in Astoria, modest by billionaire standards, but comfortable and authentic. She'd met his mother at Sunday dinner. They'd walked through his old neighborhood, and he'd shown her the apartment building where he'd grown up. No pretenses. No performances. Just two people seeing each other clearly. Settle in, get comfortable, and if you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and do that. You're safe here. At 8 p.m., long after most employees had gone home, Ethan made his way to the building's maintenance area. Tonight was special, Rita's retirement party. After 23 years of service, she was stepping down from her VP position, though she'd remain on the board of directors. The large break room had been transformed with streamers and balloons. The night cleaning crew had gathered, along with executives and board members, a mix that would have been unthinkable in the old Sterling Innovations. There he is. Rita called as Ethan entered. The man who became a janitor to save his company. Applause and laughter greeted him as he joined the celebration. Rita's family was there, her 3 children and 5 grandchildren, all beaming with pride at what she'd accomplished. I have something for you, Ethan told Rita, handing her an envelope. Inside was the deed to a small house in Florida, near where her eldest daughter lived. For your retirement. The company thanks you for your service. Tears welled in Rita's eyes as she embraced him. You know, she whispered, when I first saw you with that mop, I thought you were the worst janitor I'd ever trained. I was, Ethan laughed. But I learned from the best. As the party continued around them, Paolo approached with a question that had clearly been on his mind. Mr. Sterling, I've always wondered, who sent you that anonymous email? The one that first warned you about your wife and Mr. Chen. Ethan smiled. I never found out. But whoever it was changed the course of my life. Sometimes the most important gifts come from unexpected sources. Later, as the celebration wound down, Ethan found himself sitting with the night crew, the same people who had worked beside him during his week of invisibility. They were no longer invisible to the company, each now owned shares worth a significant amount, their pensions secure, their contributions valued. I realized something during my time with you all, Ethan told them, his voice quiet but sincere. I had built a successful company but failed to build a meaningful one. Success is measured in dollars. Meaning is measured in people's lives. He looked around the circle. You taught me that wealth without character is worthless. Power without purpose is empty. On his way out, Ethan passed the memorial wall they'd installed in the lobby, photos of employees throughout the company's history, including many who had previously been overlooked. Front and center was a photo of Ethan in his janitor's uniform, mop in hand, a reminder to everyone who entered that no role was beneath dignity, no person unworthy of respect. Outside, the Queens neighborhood was coming alive with evening energy, families walking together, small restaurants filling with customers, music drifting from open windows. This was the real world, not the isolated luxury he'd hidden within for so many years. Claire was waiting for him at a small Italian restaurant around the corner, her smile genuine when she spotted him. No calculation. No hidden agenda. Just authentic connection. As Ethan joined her, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, perhaps ever. not the frantic drive to prove himself or the exhausting performance of being someone he wasn't. Peace. Contentment. The knowledge that he was exactly where he should be. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed him had instead freed him. From false friendship. From a loveless marriage. From the prison of appearances and expectations. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what really matters. And sometimes the person who walked away simply made space for the life you deserved all along. The end.